Good evening, everyone. And our guest today on this podcast, Yovna, the ageless, is Ginat Rice, and she is a certified macrobiotic teacher and a counselor who's trained at Kushi Institute, which is the world's former center for macrobiotic studies. She is a world leader from Israel promoting healthy plant-based eating. Ginat is also a certified shiatsu massage therapist and has practiced palmistry since 2001. So, Ginat, I see I have been just reading about you and just trying to understand, what all you have been doing. And I see it's been phenomenal the way you have tried to create awareness about macrobiotics in your country. So, I think my first question, what I would want to start with is your own journey into macrobiotics. How did you got into it? And we can just take it on from there.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's really an honor for me and a pleasure. I began macrobiotics because when I moved to Israel, I was about 17 years old. It was many years ago. And I was joining with a group of other people who were starting a new kibbutz, is a new settlement or community way up on the Golan Heights. It used to be Syria, then there was one of the many wars and it became Israel. And to get to know each other, we took small trips. And one fellow was vegetarian, so we said, what could be so difficult? We'll be vegetarian for a week too. And that was it. That was the beginning of my journey. I was vegetarian for 7 years. Wow. And at the end of that period, during that time, someone told me about a lecture about macro, micro, something. I didn't know what it was. And I went along to this talk and it made so much sense. It talked about balance and about human food. And the ideas just were like, bing, bing, was just really attracted me and drew me in. So that was 1980 and 42 years ago. And it was roses from there.
Okay, so you mentioned you were 17 when you first got exposed to macrobiotics, is it?
So I was 17 when I first went to Israel, and I would say maybe 21 or so by the time I went through this whole process. No, actually, correct that, because I was 21 when I became vegan, and then 29, something around there, when I began macrobiotics.
That's a very young age to be, and specifically from a country where plant-based eating is still to be, the people are still struggling to adopt to this way of life. So,
Well, I do have good news, is that in the entire world, Israel is #1 in per capita vegan consumption. We have more vegans, than any country in the world. I mean, go figure.
And I guess
it's a little different. It's different than macrobiotics, and still, it's definitely the right direction.
Wow. And I'm sure there must be a lot of contribution for what you are doing to create awareness about all of this there. Yeah, I mean, that must definitely be a contributing factor, because the way you're doing it and, doing all those conferences and bringing those health experts in and talking about all of it, spreading word definitely makes a difference there. So, Ginat, since you have been practicing for about 40 plus years,
yes.
What has been your experience in macrobiotics when it comes to, following it in a way which, like, what are the easy things in macrobiotics and what are the difficult things, like, for somebody who's just a novice into understanding what macrobiotics
is? Sure. So some people say that macrobiotics is complicated and complex and difficult. And I say that if I want to learn Greek, it's complex and difficult. Once I know it, then it's not so difficult. It's the beginning, of course. Every beginning is difficult. I don't know if that's always true. It's an expression we have here. So it doesn't require belief. It doesn't require a commitment. It just requires a curiosity and a willingness. Many people come to macrobiotics from a health condition, that they're ill, they don't feel good, they have a disease, whatever it is. And that's a very good reason to come. It's a little more difficult if we wait until we have some kind of fearful condition, because then we're like, oh my God, So I was fortunate that I discovered it when I was young and healthy, and I loved the idea. That made it very easy to be motivated to continue. the best way to continue motivation is to find a friend. If you can find a community or a book or a counselor, a teacher or a partner, whatever it is, so that you're not alone, that certainly makes it easier.
Yeah, so that actually brings me to my next question. When it comes to macrobiotic dietary principles, we do understand that the concepts of macrobiotic diet are very different from how modern nutrition industry looks at foods, right? And it's more of the energy side of it, or the yin yang aspect of foods you're trying to understand. And it's not just about foods, you're also trying to understand the yin yang aspects of cooking, and that definitely needs some training. I mean, you cannot just blindly get into practicing all of this stuff. So what's your take on
Well, great questions. I really appreciate this. So we don't need to understand Greek before we learn it. So we don't need to know everything about yin yang and macrobiotics and whatever before we begin. Just begin wherever it is that you are. If you're interested, curious, needing, feeling that you need, whatever your reason is, it doesn't matter. Just begin where you are. So we can understand the basic foods of macrobiotics as being grain-based. So learn how to cook really good whole brown rice, or take it wherever it is that you are. Learn what foods macrobiotics generally embraces and what foods generally stays away from. The whole understanding of macrobiotics, we can say in a single word, is balance. So by that, what I mean is when we can consider extreme foods as, on one hand, meat and pork and eggs sometimes, even those. I mean, it's not a religion, so there's nothing forbidden or allowed. And we can understand extremely expansive foods as sugar or mind-expanding drugs. I mean, they're nice too. It's difficult to make a balance way out here on the extremes. And that's where modern society is. Crazy, right? Really, wars and just, all kinds of very exciting kind of lifestyles.
That's true.
So what macrobiotics does is that we try to be more balanced in our daily life. And I don't mean to stand on one point and sit in a small room in the dark and never do anything. I mean, enjoy, embrace life. So the most yang or contractive kind of food that we generally include is fish. And we even have what kind of fish and how to prepare it. And the most expansive or yin foods that we generally in day-to-day eating embrace are fruit. And again, what kind and how to prepare. This gives us enough variety that life is interesting without being crazy, so that we can have a balance. And of course, if we are imbalanced or diseased, out of ease, then we kind of adjust a little bit more this way, more that way, according to how our condition is askew.
And that's a lovely explanation. I mean, it's just about knowing the basics without getting into the technicalities of the modality, right? Great. So, Ginat, my next question would be, what exactly is macrobiotic approach to eating for somebody who's heard this term for the first time? And why I'm focusing on this is because out of the macrobiotic community, specifically in India, I mean, not many people know or understand what this modality is. And, it actually takes some level of education for us to kind of take them to a level where they actually start to understand, okay, that there's this concept of balance, or there's this concept of not getting to the extremities of foods and staying centering at the balance level. But how does that concept of centering or balance actually apply to the foods is where a lot of people see the gap. So from the practical perspective, it boils down to the right approach of macrobiotics, which is what I would want to understand from you. How can a common man understand this approach?
Great, very good. So let me think how I can give a more expanded answer from what I just kind of touched on about balance in yin and yang. The idea is that we eat for our condition. That's what I love about macrobiotics. Rather than a set of rules, it's very individualistic. So if I want to be a warrior and I want to be a soldier in the army and I want to kill people and have a very exciting life, I need to eat more meat. Or let's say that I live in a very cold climate, like what's natural, what grows in Alaska, in the far north regions, what's natural there? Maybe whale or walrus or God knows, I don't know, whatever, very few vegetables grow there. So we eat what's natural for our condition of health, our dream in life, and our location. If, taking the opposite example, I want to be a poet and I live in a very hot climate, for example, my impression of India, I have never been there, so I don't know. Or if I have a dis-ease, an illness that is more in a yin category, and I can explain that briefly as well, then I eat more yin foods to support that condition that I want to create. So again, we deal with yin and yang. Those are terms that you don't need to understand those words at all. They're just made up umbrella terms to try to explain the idea of contraction versus expansion. That's the whole balance here that we're looking for.
Yeah, that's nice. And I think I can just add on something here from the Indian understanding perspective. So to this same concept of expansion and contraction, in the yogic studies and in the Ayurveda studies, it's the same understanding of foods. The terminology varies and how they put it across varies, but the underlying concept is still the same. Like, there are two extremes and you ought to stay in the balance. In Ayurveda terminology, we call it three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And so sattva is the balancing factor, which is the centering factor, and rajas is more the yang factor, and tamas is more the yin factor. So it's like there's so much of similarity when I actually try to understand these two modalities and bring it on a common platform. And that actually gives a backing also why this approach of understanding is so very important when it comes to health. I mean, it's not just about physical chemical components of proteins, carbohydrates, and various other nutrients.
I think that all civilizations have this understanding.
Yeah.
For example, in the Bible, we say in the beginning, whatever the beginning was, right? God, whatever that is, created. So there was a manifestation of energy from amorphous to physicalized, heaven and earth. So right away, yin and yang. And then it continues the entire beginning. If you kind of look at it, it's all oppositions, this and that. It's all balances. So all traditions have an understanding of natural foods, foods that grow in that place naturally, as being the correct ones to encourage human development.
Exactly. So now again, what you just mentioned, my next question is related to that. Like, when you started practicing macrobiotics, and what kind of body and mind changes did you experience in yourself? I mean, could you explicitly figure out what's going on in you when you actually started living this way?
For me, that was really clear because I mentioned that I had been vegetarian for 7 years, and lots of dairy food, lots of kind of, the problem with vegetarian can be that it can include junk food. It can include Twizzle sticks and Snicker bars and sugar and coffee and God knows what, as long as there's no animals. So it's not very well balanced, right? It's missing the yang aspect. And it continues with all of the yin expansive sugars and all this kind of stuff. So it's not necessarily such a healthy diet. Again, a great beginning. Most people, when they come to macrobiotics, they already have been vegan or vegetarian or some kind of food consciousness lifestyle. For me, because I was eating so much dairy food, I was having colds all the time. And I didn't think about it. It just is like, okay, I've got a cold again or something. And I was recommended to a natural or naturalist or something doctor. And I thought, what is that? That's a strange idea. And this man told me, don't eat dairy food. And I fell off my chair. It was such a novel concept. It was like, whoa, all right, or something. And I stopped and I began macrobiotics right around that time as well. And boy, everything cleared up. Physically, of course, all my tubes and passageways.
Yeah.
Also, my thinking cleared up. Because when we eat cow food, dairy food is what's right for cows, baby cows particularly, we kind of become, it's a signature of foods, right? And we kind of become this energy of kind of out in the field, bovine, kind of.
Right.
So I saw myself like straighten up, and get clear and get focused and get, directed, and at the same time get grounded while I was soaring. I remember having my first understanding of what I call the order of the universe. And for me, I was raised without a clear belief in God. My parents and family, they didn't have it to give to me. And this was the big gift of macrobiotics, was a spiritual development. And that's the purpose. The purpose is not eating well for its own sake. The purpose is becoming human spiritus.
Exactly. So very beautifully said, actually. I mean, and I also believe not for everybody to understand, because it takes quite a lot of effort for you to start to understand the concept that you just mentioned. But yeah, actually, that's how it is when it comes to applying foods to you in the right way. So, coming back again to the macrobiotic way of eating, since you have been into it for last 40 years and you've seen ups and downs into macrobiotics, you've dealt with a lot of people, guided them. So what would be the beginning steps when it comes to actually starting to live a macrobiotic way in a very simple approach? How can a common man start to bring in some common changes which resonate the path of macrobiotics, if not 100%?
Sure, right. I like to say that let's add foods in rather than focusing on subtracting. So what I mean by that is let's add particularly whole cereal grains. Whole cereal grains include, the king of grains is rice, brown rice. If you don't like brown rice, have white rice or basmati rice or medium grain or red rice or whatever it is that you can find that you can enjoy, or mix together white rice with brown rice, something to ease your transition. Then other grains could be barley and millet and oats and wheat. If someone is gluten sensitive, it often is a result of accumulation of, again, dairy foods. So as the person lets go of dairy foods, they might find that gluten sensitivity clears up, because it's natural for us to be able to take in, except for poisons, all foods. So we want to be able to expand. Macrobiotic is large life. We want to include everything, say yes to everything. When I say, oh no, I can't have that, or I don't like this person, or I don't want that, or whatever, then I'm cutting myself off and I'm limiting my life and my world. So let's say yes. So we've got grains, then we've got vegetables, and the best vegetables to eat are the ones that grow in season where you are. So let's not take tropical vegetables or fruits that are shipped in, flown in. Let's eat where we are. We breathe the air where we are. Let's drink the water where we are, eat the food where we are. And then protein, and then from there, Macrobiotic kitchen is vast and varied. It's so exciting and interesting and tasty. I want to say about taste is that maybe there sometimes wants to be a transition between, especially if we're eating a lot of spicy foods or a lot of very strong flavors, then macrobiotic foods is rather basic, let's say. And we again need to sort of train ourselves, teach ourselves, or get used to these different flavors. The taste buds on literally, actually on our tongue will change. They will physically change so that we can enjoy foods. Sometimes when a person is quite heavy, it can be kind of a stuck feeling that it's hard to be light. And so spices are very helpful for that person, or in a very hot climate, to be able to move them forward. So that's the reason that they're oftentimes attracted to spicy food. And then as they start to gradually shift, and I really use the word gradual, then they can see that they can enjoy the true flavor of the food rather than the doctored up. It's like the French are very good with all kinds of sauces. And then we also say that the French like to wear perfume rather than experience or show their true flavor and true scent. So
Yeah, so no,
we're looking.
that's a nice, explanation. But I think I have one question out of what you just mentioned. What would be your advice to people who are really scared of including grains in their diet? Because, carbs is a big no-no for a lot
Great
of people.
question.
Yes.
Exactly. A lot of people are afraid that they'll get fat or overweight or gain weight if they eat carbs. What they may not know is that white polished carbohydrates, white bread and white flour and white rice and these kind of things add weight. It's true. A whole grain brown rice and whole wheat flour and bread sometimes is okay, especially a good quality one. These do not add weight. And matter of fact, especially when they're chewed very, very well, really focused on tasting the food and really chewing it in the mouth so the saliva can help digest it, then everyone that I know loses weight when they begin a correct or proper macrobiotic diet because their intestines become so much stronger to assimilate foods. So it's the things that really gain weight for us, give us weight, are junk food, French fries, I don't know. I can't even
Common
remember
foods
all
the
the
world
things.
eats today. All the
That's
common
right.
foods.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying never have this. Let's
Mhm.
enjoy party time. Just don't make party every day.
True. True. So, now help me understand, like, if somebody decides to start to live or eat the macrobiotic way, what are some common staple foods that can really help them sustain this way of life? Like, apart from grains, of course, grains you've just mentioned, but apart from grains, how should a pantry look like for a macrobiotic pantry look like for a common person, like, who's just started to understand what it is?
Okay, so let's say that this person, hypothetical person, is not coming for an health issue, because then I would have very
Yeah.
specific remedies
Yeah.
and suggestions. Let's say that kind of like in my case, I heard about it. It sounds like interesting. Let's check it out. Let's try it. So again, I have to repeat, I'm thinking how I can get around it, that the most important single food is grains. So it is a grain-based diet with vegetables, protein. I didn't mention the proteins can be beans if you are not having a problem, if you are able to digest them well. And we have cooking tips and suggestions how to make the digestion of beans easier. Or tofu, tempeh, natto, there's other kinds of bean products that we can enjoy. And then there's, like every cooking style, by the way, we are not afraid of or adverse to using oil. Again, I have to say, according to a person's condition, it's not an oil-free diet. Matter of fact, as I mentioned, nothing is forbidden. So it's a very liberating kind of understanding of what to eat and how to live my life, how to embrace a big life. That's, again, my goal.
Yeah. So you just mentioned about the cooking styles. What is the importance of cooking styles in macrobiotics? I mean, what is their
Great
relevance there?
So I mentioned before, I talked about yin and yang, expansion, contraction, right, as a kind of balance. So I gave two examples, which were on the contracted sort of, as far as we want to go within a macrobiotic understanding. I said fish. It can be a vegan diet. You don't need to eat fish. It's a possibility. It's an option. So fish, then, I understand as being the most contracted of the daily food that I want to include. So let's cook it then in more balanced form towards the middle. So rather than grill it out on the barbecue, the most yang method of cooking, let's make it into a soup, give it liquid, or let's steam it, or let's poach it, or let's find a way. Even the Japanese, so clever, they pickle it and have it raw in sushi or sashimi, right? So rather than adding fire to this already contracted food, we're going to bring it a little bit more into the center. And it's interesting, when we have fish, maybe we want white rice, because again, that's a more yin understanding, more expansive. So that might be a good balance. And then on the other extreme, I said that fruit might be as far as I want to go in the compendium of daily food. So what am I going to do with the fruit? I'm going to take it and I'm going to make it a little bit more balanced or centered by adding some fire. Maybe I'll cook it, or maybe I'll add, my father used to add a little bit of salt on his watermelon. Now, he didn't know anything about macrobiotics. He was from Texas. Yeah, just that's the way they did. Or some people I've heard add salty cheese, I think goat's cheese or something, to watermelon. So I'm not super in favor of dairy food. Still, I like the concept. I like the thinking. Let's take this yin or expansive kind of food and bring it a little bit more balanced by adding some salt or some fire or there's various different ways that we can make something more yang or something more yin, more balanced either way.
Okay, so that actually brings me to another question. I don't know if it is a relevant question, but I would really want to ask that. So you just mentioned what we are trying to do is we either with the cooking styles or with the choice of specific foods, we are trying to change the energy of the foods, right? Like we are just trying to fit them somewhere in those in this scale of yin and yang. So you know, how for a specific person, for a normal person without any health conditions, how do we decide that, say, for example, rice or some other grain has a similar kind of energy? How do we decide that we go for, say, rice or barley or any other whole grain for this person? Because the energy in both these foods is the same, right? So, you know, when it comes to actually deciding what foods to choose to bring them to a certain level of balance, what is the science behind it?
Okay, science I can't talk about. I can answer the rest of your question.
That's okay.
One of the basic tenets, and so important, is to really seek for variety. So I want all kinds of grains and beans and vegetables within an understanding of the effect of each one. We can be very specific and say, I'm going to eat barley today because it's a more springtime grain. And now we're moving into springtime and it's more upward energy, this kind of thing. Or we can just say, you know, it doesn't matter. I'm just beginning. I want to have a grain. Oh, today I feel like barley. Okay, great. Barley it is. Or we can make a combination. Let's have rice with barley today. Or let's have buckwheat. Buckwheat, we can understand all the various grains being on a compendium, on a scale of more contracted grain like buckwheat or more expansive grain like corn, maize, right? Corn meal. So from the most yang contracted to the most yin expansive, we can choose, well, what's the weather today? How do I feel? Where am I going? What's my dream? So again, I can be as specific as my nature enjoys, or I can just say, let's have spaghetti.
And that's a beautiful answer, because I think you actually got my question, what I was trying to say. The whole idea was like, you know, how can a person intuitively decide what to go with when it's just about creating balance, which can be done with any kind of food. So, but yeah, seasons do matter. What's going on within you does matter. So, which is actually, you know, a very beautiful way of explaining this. So, you know, now I would really want to understand, is it possible to live 100% as per macrobiotic dietary principles?
Well, this is such a trick question. I'll tell you the reason why. I have a yes answer and I have a no answer. The no answer, let's start with that. No one, I don't think, as far as I know, can be 100% anything. Or let's even define what that would mean. What is macrobiotics? We can't even amongst ourselves come up with a definition of what exactly does it mean to be macrobiotic or to eat macrobiotic or to follow a macrobiotic lifestyle. And that's my yes answer. Macrobios means large life. So it really is saying yes to everything. It's big life. So I can't not be macrobiotic in that sense. Everybody is, in whatever understanding or maybe lack of understanding, balancing their food as long as they're still alive, it means they have some kind of balance somewhere
Yeah,
of expansive contraction. And when it becomes off the chart, when it becomes totally imbalanced, that's when they can't support life anymore. So I'm not sure if my answer was totally clear. To be 100% macrobiotic, everyone is, and no one is.
no, I mean, I get that, but yeah, why that question actually came up, because in my practice, when I started studying macrobiotics, which was about 10 years back, I tried to be 100% of it, and I did that few days, but there was on and off. I used to follow it for quite some time, and there used to be a phase where it was just 70% or 80%, and then some kind of awakening happening again, going back to 100% again, and then coming down. So that was a curious question out of my own practice, wanting to understand whether living this way 100% is possible or not. So, but
Well,
yeah,
I'll add one more thing, is that to do something so devoted and dedicated and maybe pressured to say I'm 100%, if it becomes a kind of thing like, I'm not going
then
to go
it's
off
not
it,
done
and
for sure.
then it becomes very young.
Yes.
We can understand everything in terms of yin and yang, and it becomes so pressured and so forced and so tight, and I must, and so it's inevitable then that we then fall off at some point, until the next time, oh no, I'm going to do this, So it's actually an imbalance to have that kind of approach. If it's a very smooth and easy and hallelujah 100%, and I love it and I'm enjoying it and this is me and I've found it, that's a different kind of practice.
And now I think I got my answer. Thank you so much. Okay, so now little from the nutritional perspective, if at all that question makes sense, like when somebody starts to eat the macrobiotic way, can we ensure that the nutritional needs are being taken care of, all of them?
So here's what I know in order to answer that. As I mentioned, every traditional culture throughout history, all over the world, has its traditional diet, has its natural food understanding according to its climate. If I want to know what's right for me to eat in the place where I live, look at the grandmothers and the great and the generations back and see how they ate before there was food flown in and processed food. I have no problem with processed foods. Tempeh is processed, for example. I just want to eat a natural diet in the sense of what's appropriate for where I live. And of course, I can add who and how I am. So if my health condition is off, and in some way everyone's is, I can use my developing gradual understanding of yin and yang, of balance, in order to say, well, I need a little bit more here, or I need a little bit less there, or something. We have specific macrobiotic remedies. We have first aid kit in the kitchen or something, to know that if I have a stomach ache, or if I have a headache, or if I have this or that, or I'm tight or whatever it is, well, I could eat this, or I could do that, or I could enjoy this something. So I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, I think
I think I think I could maybe conclude that everything I need nutritionally will be supplied in a traditional natural diet. That before science knew about components of health, which is wonderful knowledge, I don't know if my great whatever grandmother knew about B12 and vitamin C and whatever it was. And I'm not saying that she had the healthiest life. I'm saying that health can be ensured by eating natural foods according to my time and place.
That's nice sense.
Maybe that's an arrogant statement.
No, but I also believe in that, because if you look back, you're actually absolutely right. Like, the ancestors did not ever knew what is B12, what are those nutritional elements, and still, they had a healthy life comparatively. So something was being done right. That's why things were all well.
Their problem, because people will ask, well, the lifespan was not as long at that time. I think their issues at that time was sanitation and cleanliness, so that they didn't, we have like over cleanliness or over sterilization, and they may not have had quite enough. So we have to find a balance.
No, yeah, but that's absolutely right. I mean, I can just quote an example here. Like, I visited a hilly place in India, which was quite a remote place in India a few months back, and there was this local guy who also got some exposure into the city life, and so he mentioned, like, at that place people only grow a handful of foods, and they grow whatever they eat, whatever they grow. I mean, there's nothing coming from the outside. So on that land, if it's 5 or 6 or 7 foods being grown, that's what their ancestors have lived onto. And now the lifespan and health conditions have really gotten much better. So nutrition was nowhere into question here. The only question was the sanitization. And as soon as the sanitization problems were resolved, the health span has automatically gone up with the same kind of foods that ancestors had been eating from very long time. Yeah.
Exactly. And we can also talk about the quality of life.
Yeah.
So that many people today have long lives without much happiness, and sometimes the end of life is prolonged and unfortunate, or accidents, all kinds of, accidents always have happened throughout history. It's an accident is not just like, oh no, they had an accident. It's some kind of imbalance. It's something showing that the lifestyle was off. Same thing with illnesses, same thing with mental conditions. Everything, in my understanding, to a degree, let's say, I'll tell you the caveat, can be improved with a macrobiotic way of life and eating. We understand health as being twofold. One is condition, that's what I'm doing right now, and one is constitution. So those are in utero, and the first 1 or 2 or 3 or so years of life that we developed our constitution, our genes, and our strength for the rest of our life. If the illness comes from there, then it's of course more difficult to treat and to rebalance. If it's the more recent it is, and the more yin, and I can define that, the illness is, the easier it is to treat. The more yang the condition, the more difficult it is. At the same time, I'll just finish, that a person with a yang illness, a very deep, inner, hard, difficult condition, once they make up their mind, they are going to do what they need to do. They don't say yes easily because they're so strong on their word. Whereas a more yin condition of ill health, of dis-ease, being more upward and outward, the person, it's easier to heal this kind of illness, and the person is not quite as good as sticking to it. They'll kind of say, well, it's not so important, or today I feel like a little, or whatever.
Okay.
So makes a balance.
Yeah, no, nice. I mean, that actually brings about some clarity into understanding the yin of a disease and the yang of a disease.
Exactly.
Yeah, nice. So, okay. So, do you think that some of the macrobiotic principles, if not all, should definitely be a part of modern nutrition therapy? And if yes, what all specifics do you think can be added to modern nutrition therapy so that it becomes more of a healing pattern of eating rather than just counting those proteins and calories and stuff?
Right. So in my understanding, the macrobiotic way of life is food for human beings. It's food for human development. It's the way that we have always eaten throughout the history of human beings, and the correct way for us to continue to be human, in a sense, not to be a cow or a pig or a horse or whatever it is, camel,
right,
that we're eating. So yes, I think it would be fabulous if, rather than looking at the small components of vitamin this and mineral that and the other, these are very yin understandings. And I'm not saying that they're wrong or bad or anything like that. It's just that we're missing the big picture of balance, of understanding energy. And Western science has a difficult time with something that they can't see or grab or hold or kind of understand. Yin and yang is difficult for a Westerner like myself because it's always changing and always moving. It's not that this is yin, it's that it's more yin or less so than something else. So it's always shifting. It's a dance. And it's, I have to get into another kind of head space in order to be able to think in those terms.
Right. No, that's nice. I mean, I get what you say. So it's the dynamic activity that's always happening very subtly, which a lot may not be able to resonate. But yeah, okay. So, but practically from the food incorporation perspective, do you think there are some specific elements that can be actually inherited in the modern nutrition therapy, which can actually make a difference to how how we apply modern therapy in today's times?
I didn't quite catch the question in there.
So the question is like, there are specific macrobiotic dietary principles, right? So out of these principles, are there some specific principles which can be actually co-joined with the modern nutrition therapy?
Yes, of course. And as I was trying to explain, the whole concept that's missing for me in Western nutrition is that of energy. So macrobiotics, yes, and macrobiotics has specific definitions and understanding of, example, yin and yang, that they exist and their relationship to each other. The idea that nothing is neutral. For example, there's no single point where we can say, now I'm balanced. Because everything changes all the time. And we say that everything has, we say front and back. And what we mean by that, everything has an advantage and a disadvantage. And we say the bigger the front, the bigger the back. The bigger the advantage, the bigger the disadvantage. It's a whole way of understanding life, really, which is why macrobiotics, again, is not only how to eat, what to eat, it's how to live and how to realize my dreams.
So what I understand by this is there's as such, there's nothing called standard to anything that we, try to standardize as such.
Well, that's such an interesting question because many times, or sometimes anyway, scientists want to do studies on macrobiotic people or way of life or something. And I always kind of scratch my head about that and wonder, because if we say we have 20 people or whatever who healed breast cancer using macrobiotics, well, were they eating exactly the same thing? Were they 100% or whatever you meant by 70%? I don't know what that means. Were they thinking in a positive way? Oh, yes, this macrobiotics, I know I can do it. Or in a way kind of like, oh my God, is this going to work? And so that takes a big part of it too. What was their family support? What are they having other therapies, chemotherapy, who knows, radiotherapy, whatever all is going on. So to do a study about macrobiotic people, there's so many variables and unknowns that I find it very difficult to be able to really plug us in and say, like in Western medicine, you take 3 grams of whatever every day and either you did or you didn't. Macrobiotics is so encompassing a lifestyle and a thought process, because sometimes I wonder, what is healing? Is healing just chewing brown rice very well and eating a macrobiotic diet? It's got to be more. It's got to be our thoughts also. And then I ask, well, what creates our thoughts? Is it the food we eat that creates our mind? Or is it our mind that chooses the foods to eat? And the answer, according to my teacher, Michio Kushi, is that there's no separation between physical and non-physical. It's all one compendium. It's all one expression, sometimes more yang, the physical, sometimes more yin, the spiritual or esoteric. So both affect each other. So again, it's to make a study of macrobiotics. People try, they do. I don't know how.
The energy concept, I guess, the subtle part of it, which cannot be seen and measured, for sure. Yeah. Okay. So I think I'm heading towards my last few questions. From the body, health parameters, the way science looks at it, like, the blood sugar parameters or the lipid profile, or the pH balance, all these parameters. How is macrobiotic diet stable in a way that it helps keep all these parameters stable? So I think that also answers why and how this approach to eating is also the approach to longevity, right?
Approach to what was the last?
To longevity.
Longevity. Well, hopefully, some people like to define the term macrobios, bios being life and macro being large. Some like to define it as being a long life. Indeed, many of our members and friends have lived to be in their 80s, 90s, and still very active. I don't know any macrobiotic thieves or prostitutes, or we live a life of, what can I say, a life of valor, or a life of balance again.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if I'm quite answering your question, because I think I've addressed those issues already here. The purpose of being human. I mean, can we go there and try to understand, why was I given this opportunity? You know, why am I here? What is my idea?
The big picture. I think
the big picture, exactly.
Yes.
How can I express who I am and offer the most benefit to other people?
Yeah. Nice. So again, my last question to you would be, and again, a curious question. Do share some of your experiences, being at the Kushi Institute, and your learnings there, and how it has been different from, or like learning wise, how the entire experience had been.
Well, I want to thank you once again for having me on your program. It's really been fun and a pleasure to talk with you. I was a student at the Kushi Institute, which is no longer active anymore, no longer running. And that began in 1982, when I left Israel in order to go to Boston at the time in the United States to study. And I studied all of the courses, everything there was. I love studying. I'm a good student, and I really enjoyed my time there, and I studied everything. And then I went on to scribe for our teacher was Michio Kushi, and I would sit in health consultations when he would recommend to the client or the patient what he thought would help them in their condition. And one time I remember he was standing with his back to the door, looking out the window, and a person came in through the door, and without turning around, Michio said, "This one's going to make it." It was some kind of intuition, that he had. It was really amazing. I went on to buy and co-own a macrobiotic restaurant in Boston after I finished all my studies. So this was an amazing experience where I really got to have my hands in the dough, as we say, really working every day in a macrobiotic restaurant. Then when we finally sold the restaurant after 10 years, and when that whole program finished, I did some studies in another field to be a teacher. And then finally, I saw Michio again after many, many years of not having seen him, of being traveling and away and studying and everything. And he turned to me and he looked at me and he said in this strong Japanese accent, "Much better." Much better.
Oh, okay.
After all these years.
Okay, nice.
So he was looking at my condition, at how I had been at the beginning, when in 1980, 82, when I first met him for the first time. And now I think it was 14 years later or something like that. And he had seen what a macrobiotic practice was able to do to my condition, to my health, and to my
so he
radiance,
could actually
perhaps.
see on your face what had been going on last 14 years.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's nice. Great. So that was quite on a positive note that we've ended the session. I mean, it kind of very nice experience that you shared. And before we end the session, Ginat, anything that you would want to add on, any question that you think I should have, that should have been asked and I missed on to it, but you would really want to add on?
Maybe it would be okay for me if I told about 2 activities that I'm organizing.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Every month, on the first Sunday of each month, I organize and have created what I call the Whole Health Macrobiotic Forum. This is a free online program. Everybody is welcome to join. I have a link that maybe I could send it to you and you could publish it.
Please do that.
All you have to do, is register. There's no cost to it. And we have 6 speakers, always on macrobiotic topics. And we have the next one coming up in a few days on Sunday, May 1st. So this is every month, and I've been doing it for a couple of years. At first, I did it a live program in Jerusalem. Then when COVID came along, I switched it to Zoom online. Okay. So that's one thing. And the other thing, I'm really excited to announce that this is a first-time endeavor that I'm undertaking, which is to take a group of friends for a macrobiotic trip or outing or travel to the country, the Republic of North Macedonia. And we're going to go there, on the 4th of September until the 13th. We're going to be away in a macrobiotic house where we have 2 chefs coming from the Netherlands who will cook for us. We'll have daily lessons, cooking classes, and we'll have daily outings to tour around and see the country and go places and enjoy ourselves. We fly into Saloniki, Greece, and fly out of the capital Skopje in Macedonia. So that's coming up too, and that's
that's so interesting. I mean, actually not reading it, but actually living this way of life, I think, and you're doing a great job there. I mean, this word should pass on, and it cannot pass on unless we actually experience what it is. Yeah. So, and yes, we definitely look forward to the link, session link that you just mentioned. Please share that with me, and I would love to spread that word out for sure. And so I think I am done with my questions. Ginat, anything? Ginat, sorry.
No, that's
anything?
it. Yeah, no, it's great.
Yeah,
great. So, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for sharing all these lovely experiences with us. Thank you so much.
Love to India.
Thank you. Same.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye.